7 teachings from Buddha to live without fear or anxiety. Fear and anxiety are two of the most universal emotions experienced by all beings. They arise from our instinct to protect ourselves, to control the unknown, and to ensure survival in an uncertain world. Yet, as the Buddha observed over 2,500 years ago, much of our suffering does not come from the world itself, but from the mind's relationship to it. Fear grows when we resist change. Anxiety blooms when we crave control over what is beyond us. Buddhism, in its timeless wisdom, offers not only solace, but a clear path to liberation from these inner storms. To live without fear or anxiety is not to suppress emotion or pretend serenity, but to awaken, to see life as it is, without distortion or attachment. The Buddha's teachings reveal that calm is not a gift from the outside, but a practice of inner seeing, moment by moment. In this exploration, we will walk through 7 Buddhist teachings that guide us toward peace in the face of life's uncertainties. Each teaching is a profound step toward dissolving the illusions that bind us to fear. From understanding impermanence to cultivating compassion and mindfulness, these principles form a spiritual roadmap, not for escaping the world, but for embracing it with wisdom and courage. Let us begin with the first teaching, a truth so simple yet so often forgotten: everything changes. Understanding impermanence, the end of fear, lies in accepting change. The Buddha's first and perhaps most profound insight was into the nature of impermanence, known in Pali as anicca. This teaching stands at the core of all Buddhist philosophy. It tells us that everything, every moment, every thought, every emotion, every life is in a constant state of change. The universe itself is movement, a river that never holds the same water twice. Fear and anxiety often arise because the mind clings. We hold on to what we love, resist what we hate, and dread what we cannot predict. The very nature of anxiety is attachment to stability in a world that does not promise it. We crave certainty where none exists. The Buddha taught that liberation begins when we stop fighting the flow of existence and start to flow with it. When you fear losing something, a relationship, a job, your youth, or your health, it is not the loss itself that torments you, but the refusal to accept that change is part of being alive. The truth is that every ending carries the seed of beginning. The leaves fall not to signal death, but to make way for spring. Similarly, every phase of our lives is a cycle of transformation. By observing impermanence, we begin to soften the tightness of our grasp on life. Imagine holding water in your hands. The tighter you squeeze, the faster it slips through your fingers. Fear is that tightening. Acceptance is the opening of the palm. The Buddha invites us to open, to release control, to see that peace comes not from preventing change, but from embracing it fully. In meditation, one learns to watch thoughts rise and fall, just like waves in the ocean. Fear comes, stays for a while, and leaves. Joy comes, stays for a while, and leaves. When you witness this with awareness, you see that no state of mind is permanent, not even anxiety itself. The simple recognition that this too shall pass becomes an antidote to panic. Understanding impermanence is also understanding life's beauty. Because everything changes, every moment becomes precious. The smile of a loved one, the scent of rain, the warmth of the sun, these things are fragile, fleeting, and therefore infinitely valuable. To live with awareness of impermanence is to live deeply, free from the dullness of taking things for granted. When you accept that nothing is fixed, fear loses its foundation. The future cannot scare you if you know it is uncertain by nature. Anxiety cannot dominate you if you trust that all emotions, even the painful ones, are temporary guests in the house of your consciousness. This is not resignation, it is wisdom. It is the realization that peace is not found in control, but in surrender. As the Buddha said, all conditioned things are impermanent. When one sees this with wisdom, one turns away from suffering. To live without fear, one must walk through life as through a river, flowing, not clinging, moving, not resisting, accepting, not fearing. If this teaching has touched you, remember to subscribe to the channel. Let us continue this journey toward inner peace together. Letting go of attachment. Freedom beyond possession. Attachment is one of the deepest roots of fear. It binds the heart to the world in a way that creates both dependence and vulnerability. When we attach ourselves to people, possessions, or even ideas, we begin to live in a fragile equilibrium, a reality where peace is only possible as long as those attachments remain intact. The Buddha, through his profound understanding of human suffering, identified attachment, upadana, as the very mechanism that gives rise to fear, anxiety, and sorrow. We fear losing what we hold dear, and in that fear we become prisoners of our own desires. Letting go is not an act of rejection, but of release. It does not mean we cease to love, but that we love without possession. It does not mean we stop caring, but that our care no longer depends on outcomes. When the Buddha spoke of detachment, he did not encourage indifference. He invited balance. He urged us to loosen our grip on the things that we cannot control, to stop expecting permanence in an impermanent world. Only then can the heart breathe freely, unburdened by the constant need to preserve, protect, and cling. Fear is born in the shadow of attachment. Imagine a person who deeply loves their youth and beauty. As time passes, the reflection in the mirror changes, and the heart grows anxious, struggling to reclaim something nature has already taken away. Or consider the person who attaches their identity to success, a job, a title, or social approval. When that job disappears or the praise fades, anxiety floods in like a rising tide. We suffer not because life changes, but because we believed it wouldn't. In truth, attachment is a subtle illusion of control. We cling to things thinking they are ours, our home, our partner, our reputation, our plans. But in reality, nothing truly belongs to us. Everything we hold is borrowed for a time. Life lends us experiences, people, and moments, and one day it reclaims them. The Buddha's teaching invites us to see this truth clearly, not as a source of sadness, but as a key to liberation. To let go is to acknowledge that the world was never ours to begin with. When we release attachment, we begin to experience a new kind of love, one that is vast, unconditional, and fearless. This love does not depend on keeping something close, but on understanding that closeness and distance are both part of the same flow. True compassion does not cling, it allows. It allows others to be who they are, allows life to unfold as it must, and allows peace to arise even amidst uncertainty. Letting go, however, is not easy. The human mind resists it with all its strength. We are conditioned to believe that security comes from possession, from holding, owning, knowing, and controlling. Yet every form of possession carries an invisible chain. The more we own, the more we fear losing. The more we expect, the more we suffer when those expectations collapse. To free ourselves, we must understand the mechanism of attachment from within. When you meditate, notice how your mind clings to thoughts, to outcomes, to feelings. You might notice a subtle tension in the chest or stomach when something you want is out of reach. That tension is attachment revealing itself. If you observe it without judgment, it begins to loosen. Awareness itself is the knife that cuts through the knot of desire. When fear arises, ask yourself, what am I afraid of losing? This simple question reveals the root of anxiety. Most of the time, the answer is something impermanent: approval, control, love, comfort. Once you see that, you can ask again, was it ever truly mine? The answer, when seen with clarity, is always no. And in that realization, something inside you exhales. The mind stops grasping, and in that moment, peace enters. There is a story from the Buddhist tradition that illustrates this truth beautifully. A monk once carried a bowl of water to his teacher, trembling so that half the water spilled along the path. The teacher smiled and said, "You tremble because you are afraid to lose the water, but what if you understood that losing and keeping are the same in the flow of time?" The monk did not answer, but he never forgot the lesson. Years later, when he reached enlightenment, he said that the bowl was his first teacher. The Buddha's path is not about removing all desire from life, but about transforming it. There is a difference between desire and attachment. Desire can be a pure expression of energy, the wish to grow, to help, to love. Attachment is when that desire becomes entangled with identity and fear. You may love someone deeply, but if your peace depends on their presence, your love has become bondage. When you love freely, you find joy even in letting go, because you recognize that every connection has its own rhythm: meeting, staying, parting. In practice, letting go begins in the small moments. When you lose your keys, miss an opportunity, or receive criticism, notice how your mind reacts. Does it tighten? Does it replay the moment, seeking to control what has already passed? Each time you bring awareness to this reaction and soften it, you train the mind to release its grip. Over time, this becomes natural. You begin to see that peace is not the absence of loss, but the absence of resistance to loss. The Buddha compared attachment to holding a burning coal. The tighter you hold, the more it burns. You can either drop it and feel relief, or cling and continue suffering. Every fear we experience is a reflection of that burning. We hold on to our self-image, to our possessions, to our memories, and in doing so, we create the very anxiety we wish to avoid. To live without attachment does not mean to renounce the world and live in solitude, but to live in the world without letting it define you. It means eating with gratitude, not greed, loving without possession, acting without expectation. It is a life of openness, where joy flows freely because the heart is not burdened by clinging. When you truly understand impermanence, as in the first teaching, letting go becomes natural. You stop expecting permanence from what is transient. You stop demanding certainty from what is fluid. You stop measuring life by what you can hold. The paradox is that when you release control, you gain peace. When you let go, you finally receive. Fear and anxiety begin to dissolve the moment you no longer tie your happiness to the outcome of events. When your well-being is not dependent on external conditions, the storms of life lose their power. You become like a mountain, unmoved by the winds of change, grounded in the awareness that all things come and go. In relationships, letting go allows true intimacy. When you stop clinging, you start listening. You see the other person not as a possession, but as a fellow traveler on the path of impermanence. You love them not because they complete you, but because their existence is a gift, momentary and miraculous. Even if they must leave, the love remains, not as pain, but as gratitude. In daily life, detachment means meeting every moment as it is, without forcing it to fit your preferences. It is accepting the now, whether joyful or painful, with the understanding that it is simply a wave in the vast ocean of existence. Fear cannot survive in this state of openness. Anxiety cannot take root in the soil of acceptance. Ultimately, letting go is an act of faith, not in religion, but in life itself. It is the trust that existence has its own intelligence, that everything unfolds in its own time, and that you are part of something far greater than your limited mind can conceive. When you trust this flow, fear dissolves, because there is no longer a need to control. You begin to live with lightness, as though the weight of the world has been lifted from your shoulders. The Buddha once said, "You only lose what you cling to." This truth, simple yet profound, holds the essence of freedom. The anxiety of losing arises only when you believe something is yours. But if you see everything, even your body, your thoughts, your relationships, as temporary gifts, you can move through life with gratitude instead of fear. Every spiritual tradition points to this same truth in different words. Christianity calls it surrender, Taoism calls it harmony with the way, Buddhism calls it non-attachment. They all describe the same liberation, the freedom of the heart that no longer resists what is. To live without fear, learn to let go, not once, but every day, in every moment. Let go of yesterday's pain, of tomorrow's worry, of today's control. Each release is a return to peace. The more you practice it, the more natural it becomes, until one day you find that there is nothing left to release because you are simply flowing with life as it is. When the mind no longer clings, there is only presence, and in presence, fear cannot exist. What remains is clarity, stillness, and a profound sense of freedom. That is the space where the Buddha lived, and where you too can dwell here and now. If this teaching spoke to your heart, take a moment to subscribe to the channel and continue walking this path of peace and wisdom. Together, let's keep awakening the light within. The power of mindfulness, calming the inner storm. Mindfulness is the art of returning home, not to a physical place, but to the present moment, where life truly unfolds. The Buddha called it sati, the steady awareness of what is happening within and around us, without judgment or resistance. It is through mindfulness that one begins to truly see, to recognize that fear and anxiety are not external enemies, but movements of the mind that rise and fall like waves on the surface of a vast ocean. To live without fear is not to destroy the waves, but to remember that beneath them the ocean is still. Mindfulness is the way back to that depth. When anxiety strikes, it often feels as if the mind has been hijacked. Thoughts race toward the future. What if this happens? What if that goes wrong? What if I fail? Fear thrives in this imagined landscape of what has not yet occurred. Mindfulness breaks this chain by pulling us back to what is actually happening, right here, right now. It reminds us that the present moment, no matter how challenging, is always more manageable than the illusions our mind creates. The Buddha taught that suffering arises not from what happens, but from our reaction to what happens. Mindfulness gives us the space to observe that reaction instead of being consumed by it. When you feel fear, rather than identifying with it, you can say, "Fear is here." In that simple acknowledgement, something shifts. The fear is no longer you. It becomes an experience within awareness. You have separated the observer from the observed. This distance is freedom. To practice mindfulness, you begin by noticing the breath. The breath is the anchor, the one constant rhythm that has been with you since birth. When you bring your attention to the rise and fall of the breath, you are reminded that you are alive, and that life is always happening in this very moment. The mind may wander to the past or rush into the future, but the breath gently calls you back. It says, "You are here." When practiced consistently, mindfulness reveals a profound truth. Thoughts are not facts. They are events, appearing and disappearing like clouds in the sky. You may think, "I'm not safe," or "I'll fail," but when you look closely, you see these are just words, sounds in the mind, not realities. Fear often disguises itself as truth, but mindfulness unmasks it. It lets you see that much of what you fear is imagined, not real. The anxious mind is like a river in flood, turbulent, noisy, overflowing its banks. Mindfulness acts like a dam that slows the current, allowing the water to settle. As you observe your thoughts without feeding them, they begin to lose their momentum. The waves subside, and what remains is clarity. You start to see that underneath the chaos, there is always stillness. That stillness is not something you create. It has been there all along, hidden beneath the noise of overthinking. When fear arises, you can gently bring your attention to it. Notice where it lives in your body, perhaps a tightness in the chest, a knot in the stomach, a trembling in the hands. Breathe into it. Do not try to push it away or analyze it. Simply witness it as sensation, energy moving through you. This simple act of observation transforms the experience. What was once a suffocating fog becomes a cloud passing in an open sky. The Buddha compared this to watching a candle flame, steady and silent, illuminating everything without being disturbed by what it reveals. Through mindfulness, you learn to accept what is. Acceptance does not mean passive surrender, but clear seeing. It means you stop fighting reality. Most of our fear and anxiety come not from the events themselves, but from our resistance to them. We want life to fit our expectations, and when it doesn't, we panic. Mindfulness teaches us to meet life as it is, not as we wish it to be. When you are present, even pain becomes more bearable, because you are no longer multiplying it with stories and judgments. Imagine sitting under a tree during a storm. The wind howls, the rain lashes, the thunder roars, yet the tree remains rooted. Mindfulness is that rootedness. It gives you a center that no storm can uproot. When you live mindfully, you stop being swept away by every gust of emotion. You begin to see fear not as an enemy, but as a messenger. It tells you where your attachments lie, where your illusions still hold power. When seen this way, even fear becomes a teacher. Mindfulness also dissolves the illusion of control. Anxiety often comes from trying to predict or manage the future, but the truth is, the future never arrives. Only the present does. The moment you stop fighting uncertainty and instead bring awareness to what is now, peace begins to rise naturally. You realize that safety is not found in controlling life, but in being awake to it. The practice of mindfulness extends beyond meditation. It is not confined to the cushion or the temple. It is a way of living. You can be mindful while washing dishes, walking, eating, or speaking. Every action can become an opportunity to return to presence. When you eat mindfully, you truly taste your food. When you listen mindfully, you truly hear another's heart. When you breathe mindfully, you touch the miracle of being alive. One of the Buddha's most powerful teachings is that the mind can be trained. Just as a wild elephant can be tamed through patient guidance, the restless, fearful mind can be calmed through consistent practice. Each moment of mindfulness strengthens the muscle of awareness. Over time, the storms that once felt overwhelming begin to lose their grip. The waves still come, but they no longer define you. You start to see that awareness is vast enough to hold them all. In moments of anxiety, it is helpful to silently repeat, breathing in, I know I am breathing in. Breathing out, I know I am breathing out. This simple practice grounds you. The mind wants to wander, but the breath is always here, faithful and quiet. It brings you back to reality, not the one your fears create, but the one that actually exists. The Buddha described mindfulness as the direct path to liberation. Lao. Why? Because awareness cuts through illusion. When you see clearly, you no longer get lost in the stories the mind invents. You no longer mistake thoughts for reality. Fear loses its fuel because it depends on unconsciousness to survive. Like a thief who can only operate in the dark, fear disappears when the light of awareness shines upon it. But mindfulness is not only about calming the mind, it is also about cultivating compassion. As you observe your own fear without judgment, you develop gentleness toward yourself. You stop condemning your anxiety and start understanding it. This shift from judgment to curiosity changes everything. You realize that fear is not a flaw, but a natural part of being human. It is the mind's attempt to protect you, however clumsy. When you see it with compassion, it begins to soften. The miracle of mindfulness is that it transforms fear into insight. Instead of running from discomfort, you learn from it. Every anxious thought becomes an opportunity to wake up. When fear says, "You are not safe," mindfulness asks, "Is that true right now?" When anxiety says, "You can't handle this," mindfulness replies, "I am handling it now, in this breath." Over time, this practice builds resilience. You begin to trust your ability to meet whatever arises moment by moment. To live mindfully is to live with awareness of impermanence, interconnection, and compassion. You begin to see that everything, even fear, is part of the same tapestry. You are not separate from life. You are an expression of it. When you walk, the earth supports you. When you breathe, the trees breathe with you. When you suffer, countless beings understand your pain. This recognition dissolves the isolation that fuels anxiety. You are not alone. You are part of something infinite. Mindfulness does not remove difficulty, but it removes the unnecessary suffering we add to difficulty. You will still feel fear, but it will no longer dominate you. It will pass through like weather through the sky, leaving the vastness untouched. The more you practice, the more you realize that peace is not something you achieve. It is something you uncover, layer by layer, by bringing awareness to each moment. The Buddha once compared the mind to a clear lake. When disturbed by thoughts and emotions, the water becomes muddy and you cannot see the bottom. But when you let the water rest, it naturally becomes clear again. Mindfulness is that resting. It is not effort, but the cessation of struggle. When the mind is still, wisdom arises on its own. You begin to see the patterns of craving and aversion that create suffering, and by seeing them, they begin to dissolve. In the quiet of mindfulness, even the most terrifying fears lose their form. You might realize that beneath every fear lies the same core illusion, the belief in a separate self. The Buddha taught that much of our anxiety comes from identifying with the I. I might lose, I might fail, I might die. But when you observe your thoughts deeply, you notice that the self is not a fixed entity. It is a collection of sensations, perceptions, and memories constantly changing. The more you see this, the less there is to defend. Fear dissolves because there is no one left to be afraid. This realization does not come through philosophy, but through direct experience in mindfulness. Sitting quietly, observing the breath, watching thoughts rise and fade, you begin to sense that awareness itself is untouched. Pain arises, joy arises, fear arises, and all of them pass. But awareness remains. That awareness is your true refuge. It cannot be threatened or destroyed. It is like the sky, vast, unshakable, eternal, while the storms are temporary visitors. When you live from this awareness, your actions become more deliberate, your words more gentle, your presence more grounded. You respond to life instead of reacting to it. This is the essence of fearlessness, not the absence of fear, but the presence of clarity. A mindful person may still encounter danger, loss, or sorrow, but they meet these with calm eyes and an open heart. They know that everything, even pain, belongs to the great dance of existence. Mindfulness turns ordinary life into meditation. When walking, you feel each step. When listening, you truly hear. When breathing, you touch life directly. Each moment becomes sacred because you are fully there. In that fullness, fear finds no room to grow. Anxiety feeds on distraction, on the gap between life as it is and life as we imagine it. Mindfulness closes that gap. It reunites you with reality, and in reality there is always peace. The Buddha's own awakening was the ultimate expression of mindfulness. Sitting under the Bodhi tree, he did not escape fear. He faced it with unwavering attention. He watched every illusion dissolve in the light of awareness until only truth remained. We too can walk that path in our own lives by watching, breathing, and remembering that every moment is a chance to wake up. Through mindfulness, the heart becomes vast enough to hold joy and sorrow alike. You no longer run from life or chase after it. You rest in the middle, balanced, awake, alive. That balance is freedom. Fear cannot control a mind that is fully present, because fear lives in the future, and the mindful person lives now. The practice may be simple, but its power is immeasurable. Each time you return to the breath, you reclaim your peace. Each time you observe a thought without reacting, you weaken the chains of anxiety. Each time you meet fear with awareness, you transform it into wisdom. In this way, mindfulness becomes not just a practice, but a way of being, a way of living without fear, anchored in the calm of your own awakened heart. And so, mindfulness reveals what was true all along. Peace is not something to be sought, but something to be remembered. It is always here, waiting beneath the noise. All you need to do is stop running and look within. If this teaching helped you feel a sense of calm or insight, remember to subscribe to the channel. Together we will continue to explore the timeless wisdom of the Buddha and awaken the strength within our hearts. Compassion as the cure for fear and separation. Compassion is the flowering of the awakened heart. It is not merely kindness or sympathy. It is the deep recognition that all beings suffer, and that their suffering is not separate from our own. In Buddhism, compassion is called karuna, and it stands alongside wisdom as one of the two wings of enlightenment. Without wisdom, compassion can be blind, and without compassion, wisdom can be cold. Together, they form the balance that allows a human being to live without fear and without hatred. For the Buddha, compassion was not an abstract ideal, but a living force that dissolves anxiety, loneliness, and division. To understand compassion as the cure for fear, we must first understand the nature of fear itself. Fear thrives in separation. It is born from the illusion that I am here, and the world, with all its dangers, people, and uncertainties, is out there. This separation breeds defensiveness. We see others as threats, the future as uncertain, and ourselves as vulnerable. But the Buddha taught that this perception of separateness is an illusion. At the deepest level, all things are interconnected, like waves on the same ocean. When this truth is realized, fear begins to fade, because the self we are trying to protect dissolves into something larger, something vast and boundless. Compassion is the practice of dissolving that illusion consciously. It opens the heart to the reality that your pain is not yours alone, that suffering is a shared human condition. The anxious person believes they are isolated in their suffering, but through compassion, they begin to see that others too are afraid, lost, yearning, and searching. This recognition transforms anxiety into empathy. The energy that once fueled fear becomes the energy of connection. You begin to see that when you help another, you also help yourself. The Buddha's compassion was not limited to those who were kind or deserving. He extended it even to those who caused harm, for he understood that ignorance lies at the root of cruelty. When people act with malice, they do so from blindness, from fear, confusion, or delusion. To respond to hatred with hatred only deepens the cycle of suffering. Compassion breaks that cycle. It says, I see your pain, even if you do not see it yourself. It does not condone wrongdoing, but it recognizes the suffering that drives it. This perspective releases the heart from anger and allows peace to take root. One of the Buddha's great teachings on compassion is found in the Metta Sutta, the discourse on loving kindness. In it, he describes a mind filled with goodwill for all beings, for the strong and the weak, the near and the far, the seen and the unseen. The practitioner radiates love as a mother protects her only child. This boundless love, known as metta, is both a shield and a source of courage. When the heart is filled with love, fear finds no place to rest. Anxiety dissolves because you are no longer centered on the self that can be harmed. The modern mind often confuses compassion with weakness, but in truth, it is the highest form of strength. It takes immense courage to open your heart in a world that teaches you to guard it. Fear closes the heart. Compassion opens it. Fear says, I must protect myself. Compassion says, may all beings be safe. Fear narrows the field of perception. Compassion expands it until it includes even those who frighten you. The moment you can look upon another, even an enemy, and wish them freedom from suffering, you transcend fear. You move from the small self to the universal self, from the anxious to the awakened. In the presence of compassion, anxiety loses its meaning. Anxiety is the body's reaction to imagined danger. Compassion is the heart's recognition of shared vulnerability. When you cultivate compassion, you begin to see that everyone you meet is carrying their own invisible burdens. The person who criticizes you may be drowning in insecurity. The one who ignores you may be lost in their own pain. When you see this, You stop taking things personally. The world no longer feels hostile. It becomes understandable. And what is understood cannot be feared. Practicing compassion begins with yourself. The Buddha often emphasized metta bhavana, the cultivation of loving kindness, as a foundation for all other practices. Many people live in constant fear because they have turned their own mind into an enemy. They judge, punish, and shame themselves endlessly. The inner dialogue of self-criticism becomes a source of chronic anxiety. But when you turn compassion inward, when you learn to speak to yourself as you would to a dear friend, the war inside begins to end. Fear softens because it no longer finds hostility within. To practice self-compassion, sit quietly and repeat words of kindness toward yourself. May I be safe. May I be peaceful. May I be free from fear. At first, it may feel unnatural, especially if you have spent years believing you are unworthy of love. But as you repeat these phrases, you begin to rewire the mind. You learn that love does not need to be earned. It is your true nature. When you are kind to yourself, you create the inner stability that allows you to face the world without anxiety. As compassion grows, it naturally extends outward. The boundaries between self and others blur. You begin to feel joy in another's happiness and sorrow in another's pain. This is not sentimental emotion, but deep empathy born from understanding. Compassion reveals that your well-being is inseparable from the well-being of others. If you wish to live without fear, you cannot wish harm upon anyone. Every thought of hatred poisons the mind. Every act of compassion purifies it. When you act from compassion, even small gestures have immense power. A kind word, a listening ear, a silent prayer, these become acts of healing. And as you heal others, you heal yourself. The anxious heart that once trembled at the uncertainty of life now finds purpose in alleviating suffering. The focus shifts from self-preservation to service. Paradoxically, the more you give, the less you fear losing. You begin to trust that love replenishes itself endlessly when shared. There is a story in the Buddhist tradition of a woman named Kisa Gotami, whose child had died. Overcome with grief, she went to the Buddha begging for medicine to bring her son back to life. The Buddha told her to gather mustard seeds from any house that had not known death. She went from door to door, but in every home she found sorrow. Each family had lost someone they loved. When she returned to the Buddha, she understood the lesson. Suffering is universal. In that moment of realization, her personal grief transformed into compassion. Her fear of death dissolved, replaced by the understanding that life's fragility connects us all. This story illustrates the heart of Buddhist compassion, the transformation of suffering through understanding. When you see that pain is not personal, that it is woven into the fabric of existence, you stop fighting it. You become gentle with yourself, with others, with life itself. Fear disappears because you no longer stand against the world. You stand with it. Compassion also reshapes the way we experience uncertainty. Fear often arises from the unknown, from not knowing what will happen next. But when you live compassionately, your focus shifts from outcomes to intentions. You trust that whatever the future brings, you can meet it with kindness. This trust dissolves anxiety because you are no longer trying to control what you cannot. You simply choose love again and again in each moment. When fear arises, compassion answers. If you are afraid of failure, compassion whispers, you are doing your best. If you are afraid of rejection, compassion says, you are worthy of love. If you are afraid of the future, compassion reminds you, you are not alone. Each time you respond to fear with kindness, the neural pathways of anxiety weaken and the pathways of peace grow stronger. The Buddha often compared compassion to a lotus flower. It grows in the mud, yet remains unstained. This means that even in the midst of chaos, even surrounded by suffering, the heart can remain pure and open. The mud of fear, anger, and confusion becomes the very ground from which compassion blooms. The deeper the mud, the stronger the flower. In this way, suffering itself becomes sacred because it gives birth to wisdom and love. True compassion is fearless because it no longer revolves around the ego. When the self dissolves, there is nothing left to protect, and therefore nothing to fear. The Bodhisattva, the ideal of compassion in Mahayana Buddhism, is the one who vows to return again and again to the world of suffering, not out of obligation, but out of love. The Bodhisattva's courage is not the absence of fear, but the transcendence of it through compassion. They walk into the darkness holding a light that is not for themselves alone, but for all beings. In daily life, compassion can be practiced in simple ways. When someone speaks harshly, you can pause and respond with understanding instead of anger. When you encounter someone suffering, you can offer presence instead of judgment. Even when you are afraid, you can choose to extend kindness, a smile, a word, a gesture. These small acts accumulate, transforming your mind from one ruled by fear to one ruled by love. Science has begun to confirm what the Buddha taught centuries ago. Compassion changes the brain. Studies show that regular loving-kindness meditation reduces anxiety, increases feelings of safety, and strengthens the neural circuits associated with empathy and joy. Compassion literally rewires the mind toward calmness and resilience. It is not merely a moral virtue, it is a spiritual technology, the most powerful antidote to fear humanity has ever known. But compassion must be genuine. It cannot be forced or performed. It arises naturally when the heart is clear of resentment and the mind free of judgment. To cultivate it, you must be patient. Like a seed, it grows slowly, nourished by awareness and understanding. Every time you choose empathy over anger, patience over irritation, forgiveness over blame, the seed grows stronger. Over time, compassion becomes your natural state. Fear and anxiety lose their grip because you have built a foundation on love. The Buddha once said, "Hatred does not cease by hatred, but only by love. This is the eternal law." This truth applies not only to others, but to yourself. When you stop hating your own fear, when you stop judging your anxiety, they begin to dissolve. They are healed by the very love you offer them. The heart becomes a refuge, a sanctuary where all emotions are welcomed, transformed, and released. To live with compassion is to walk through the world with open hands and an open heart. You no longer seek to grasp or control. You seek to understand and connect. You realize that every being, human, animal, even the smallest insect, wants the same thing, to be free from suffering. This recognition awakens reverence for life. It makes you gentle, humble, and fearless. When compassion fills the heart, fear becomes impossible because love and fear cannot occupy the same space. Love expands, fear contracts. Love unites, fear divides. Love says, "We are one." Fear says, "I am alone." The moment you choose love, fear dissolves like mist under the morning sun. So the path to a fearless life is not through hardening yourself, but through softening. It is not through resisting fear, but through embracing it with compassion. When you can look at your fear tenderly, without judgment, it loses its power. It becomes another form of life, asking for understanding. In the end, compassion is not just a feeling. It is a way of seeing. It is the recognition that beneath all appearances, all differences, there is only one reality, consciousness expressing itself in countless forms. When you see this, you live with reverence, not anxiety. You move through the world not as a stranger in a dangerous place, but as a participant in a sacred unfolding. The Buddha's path of compassion is a call to awaken the heart's natural capacity to love without fear. It is a reminder that in loving others, you discover your own wholeness. In helping others heal, you heal yourself. And in recognizing the shared nature of suffering, you find freedom from it. If this teaching opened something within you, if it reminded you of your own capacity to love beyond fear, remember to subscribe to the channel, and let us continue this journey of awakening the heart, together in compassion and peace. The wisdom of non-self, beyond the illusion of I. At the very heart of the Buddha's enlightenment lies one of the most liberating and challenging truths ever taught, the doctrine of anatta, non-self. The Buddha saw that what we call I, me, or mine, is not a solid, independent entity, but a constantly changing process of thoughts, sensations, memories, and perceptions. There is no permanent self standing apart from life. There is only the flow of experience. To grasp this deeply is to pull the roots of fear out of the mind, for fear can only exist where there is someone to protect, someone to lose, someone to defend. When that illusion dissolves, what remains is vast freedom, the peace that no external condition can threaten. To most people, this idea sounds unsettling at first. The sense of self feels undeniable. We wake up each morning and feel continuity with who we were yesterday. We remember our name, our history, our ambitions. Yet when we look closer through the lens of awareness, this self begins to unravel. The body changes from moment to moment, cells dying and being replaced. The mind changes even faster, one thought following another like clouds moving across the sky. Where is the unchanging I in this flux? When the Buddha asked his disciples to look directly at their experience, he guided them to see that the self is not found in the body, nor in feelings, nor in perceptions, nor in thoughts, nor in consciousness itself. Each of these is impermanent, dependent on conditions, and subject to change. What we call I is simply the collection of these processes, linked by memory and habit. The realization of non-self does not destroy individuality. It reveals that individuality is fluid. Just as a flame passes from one candle to another without being the same or different, the stream of consciousness continues without a fixed core. This understanding dismantles the deepest source of fear, the fear of death, of loss, of annihilation. If there is no fixed self, then what is there to die? Life continues, transforming, flowing, expressing itself in infinite forms. What we call death is just a change in the pattern of energy, not the end of being. Much of human anxiety comes from defending this illusory self. We worry about reputation, status, identity, and appearance. We build walls around an image that doesn't truly exist. When someone criticizes us, we feel wounded because we believe they have attacked the I. When we lose a possession or a relationship, we feel diminished because we think something has been taken from me. Yet the Buddha saw that this me is a mirage, like a reflection on the water. The reflection changes as the light changes. The water ripples, but the essence of the lake remains untouched. Understanding non-self allows us to move through life like the lake, still and reflective, responding to each wave without losing our depth. Fear arises when we cling to the image on the surface. Peace arises when we identify with the depth beneath. When we let go of the obsession with the self, a great space opens within us. A space where compassion, wisdom, and courage can grow naturally. We no longer react defensively to every challenge. Instead, we respond with calm, because there is no self that needs constant protection. This is not an intellectual belief, but a direct experience cultivated through mindfulness and meditation. When you sit in silence and watch the mind, you begin to notice that thoughts arise and pass away on their own. You do not create them. They appear, stay briefly, and disappear. The same is true of emotions and sensations. They are like guests visiting the house of consciousness. Who then is the owner of this house? The deeper you look, the more you see that there is no permanent owner, only awareness itself, vast and open, hosting everything without attachment. The illusion of self is like a dream we have mistaken for reality. In the dream, we feel joy and fear, victory and defeat, because we believe the dream character is who we are. When we awaken, the dream dissolves, and we realize that none of it could truly harm us. The Buddha's awakening was this kind of realization, not an escape from life, but a waking up within it. He saw that the suffering of the world arises from the clinging of the false self, and that liberation arises when the self is seen through and released. When fear grips you, look at it closely. Ask, who is afraid? You may answer, I am. But who is this I? Is it the body? The body is changing every moment. Is it the mind? The mind is a stream of passing thoughts. Is it the personality? That too shifts depending on circumstances. As you investigate, the solidity of the I begins to crumble. The fear loses its center because the one it threatened was never there in the way you believed. What remains is awareness, silent, spacious, unafraid. This insight changes the entire way we relate to life. When there is no fixed self, there is no rigid boundary between you and the world. You are not in life, you are life. The wind moves through you as breath. The sunlight becomes your warmth. The suffering of others echoes in your own heart. In this realization, compassion becomes natural, not as a moral duty, but as the recognition of oneness. To harm another would be to harm yourself. To help another is to help yourself. The anxiety born of isolation dissolves, replaced by the serenity of belonging to all things. The Buddha used many metaphors to illustrate non-self. One of them was the chariot. When we say chariot, we refer to the collection of parts, wheels, axle, yoke, seat, arranged in a certain way, but remove the parts and there is no chariot left to find. Likewise, when you examine what you call self, you find only parts, the body, feelings, thoughts, but no independent entity. The word I is a convenient label, not an absolute reality. It helps us navigate the world, but it becomes a source of suffering when we believe it points to something permanent. The illusion of self also fuels comparison and competition. We fear that others are better, smarter, richer, or more successful. But when the sense of self loosens, these comparisons lose meaning. You stop measuring your worth against others because you see that everyone is simply expressing the same consciousness in different forms. The flower does not envy the tree. The river does not compete with the ocean. They are all part of the same unfolding. In this view, peace replaces jealousy and gratitude replaces insecurity. Fear thrives on attachment to identity. We fear failure because we identify as the successful one. We fear rejection because we identify as the lovable one. We fear aging because we identify as the youthful one. Every label becomes a cage, and every cage breeds anxiety. When you see through the labels, you become fluid like water, able to take any shape without losing your essence. You realize that you are not a fixed character in the play of life, but the consciousness watching the play unfold. That realization is liberation. This teaching does not mean we should deny our humanity or our individuality. The Buddha never asked his followers to erase their personality or ignore their personal responsibilities. Instead, he invited them to hold identity lightly, to wear it like a robe, not like a chain. You still play your roles, parent, friend, teacher, student, but you know they are temporary. When the play ends, you take off the costume and rest in your true nature, awareness itself. When awareness becomes your identity, fear loses its foundation. Awareness is untouchable. Pain may arise, loss may occur, the body may age, but awareness simply observes. It is the sky watching the weather. The storms come and go, but the sky remains unchanged. To live from this understanding is to live without anxiety, because you no longer cling to what is transient. You rest in what is eternal, the open space of being. In practical terms, this insight can transform your daily life. When someone offends you, instead of reacting defensively, you can pause and notice the sensations and thoughts that arise. You see them as passing events, not as attacks on a solid self. You respond with calm rather than anger. When faced with uncertainty, you remember that the I that seeks control is just a thought, one of countless thoughts arising in awareness. The moment you see it as such, the grip of anxiety loosens. Non-self also brings freedom from guilt and shame. These emotions often stem from identifying with our mistakes. I am bad, I am unworthy. But if there is no fixed self, there is no unchanging sinner or saint. There are only actions and consequences, causes and effects. You can learn from your past without being defined by it. Each moment is a new opportunity to act wisely. The past does not imprison you because the you of the past no longer exists. This perspective also changes how we view death. Most people fear death because they believe it is the end of me. But if there is no fixed self, what dies? The body returns to the earth, the energy disperses, the consciousness continues in ways we may not understand. Life rearranges itself. The wave subsides, but the ocean remains. Knowing this, you can face mortality not with terror, but with reverence. Every breath becomes sacred because it is temporary. Every moment becomes enough because it is complete in itself. To realize non-self is to awaken from the dream of separation. It does not make life meaningless. It makes life infinitely meaningful. You see beauty in everything because everything is part of you. You no longer fear change because you are change. You no longer fear loss because nothing can be truly lost in a universe where everything transforms. You no longer fear rejection because there is no separate self to be rejected. What remains is the quiet joy of simply being the witness, the awareness, the open space in which all of existence unfolds. The Buddha once told his disciples that understanding non-self is like removing an arrow from the heart. The arrow of ignorance pierces us with fear, greed, and hatred. We go through life trying to protect the wound instead of pulling out the arrow. But when we see clearly that the self we are defending is only a concept, the arrow falls away and the heart begins to heal. The energy once wasted in self-protection flows outward as compassion, inward as peace, and upward as wisdom. This realization does not come all at once. It unfolds gradually, through practice, patience, and insight. At first, the mind resists, clinging to the familiar sense of I. But with time and mindfulness, the boundaries soften. Moments of spacious awareness arise more often, moments when you forget yourself completely, absorbed in music, nature, or love. In those moments, fear vanishes. The experience of non-self is already present whenever you lose yourself in beauty or service. The path of Buddhism simply helps you recognize that this selfless awareness is your natural state. In the stillness of meditation, when thoughts quiet down, there is a feeling of vastness, an emptiness that is not void but full of potential. That is the experience of anatta. It is the realization that awareness is not inside the body is inside awareness. The entire world, with all its joys and sorrows, arises within this infinite field. You are not a small being looking out at the universe. You are the universe looking at itself. Once this truth is glimpsed, even briefly, fear loses its hold forever. To live with this wisdom is to live with serenity in the midst of change. When others are angry, you remain calm, knowing their anger is a passing storm. When difficulties arise, you face them without panic, because you know they too will pass. When success comes, you enjoy it without attachment, because you no longer depend on it to define you. Life becomes a dance, fluid, graceful, spontaneous. You move with what comes, without resistance or anxiety. Non-self is not a concept to be believed, but a reality to be experienced. It is the direct seeing that there was never anyone separate to begin with, only the play of consciousness taking countless forms. The Buddha compared it to a mirage. It appears real until you approach it closely, and then you see it was always an illusion. In the same way, the sense of I appears solid until awareness looks deeply and then it disappears into infinite openness. When you live from that openness, your heart becomes fearless. Nothing can truly be taken from you because you own nothing. Nothing can truly harm you because there is no fixed you to harm. You live in harmony with all that is, trusting the rhythm of existence. Fear and anxiety are replaced by gratitude and wonder. You begin to see every moment, even the difficult ones, as expressions of the boundless mystery you are part of. And so the final liberation the Buddha pointed to is not the escape from life, but the end of the illusion of separateness within life. When the self dissolves, love flows freely, fear falls silent, and the world reveals itself as what it always was, radiant, interconnected, and whole. To awaken to this is to live without anxiety, without division, without resistance. It is to rest in the truth that you were never apart from peace. You only dreamed you were. If this final teaching helped you see more clearly the path to freedom and peace, take a moment to subscribe to the channel and continue this journey toward awakening. Together, we will keep exploring the wisdom of the Buddha and the infinite calm that lies beyond the illusion of self.